Welcome to Stories in Focus. I'm Ellouise Schoettler, your storyteller host. And today I can't tell you how happy I am. We have a very special guest down from Baltimore, Jon Spelman, fabulous storyteller.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yes, I know. We had a good time last time. And in the meantime, you've been really developing several large productions that we didn't talk about the last time you were here.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's the Lincoln, and then there's your newest one-person show, which is the Prostate Dialogues.
Right.
See, I confuse the title every once in a while. So.
One is Tales of the Lincoln, it's called, and the other is the Prostate Dialogues.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Tell us, I know that you're going to tell us a little something from the Lincoln, are you not?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your new Prostate Dialogues show and how that came about. How did you get into that?
Well, one day I was feeling a little more tired than usual.
Yes, I was trying to think of what's the gentle way to say that.
And a little older than I wanted to be.
Right.
So I went to a doctor, and she sent me to another doctor and to another doctor, and then bingo, I've got prostate cancer.
Right.
That's the beginning of the story, but that's really what happened. You know, you go to a doctor because you're thinking, oh, I ought to get this checked a little bit. And one thing leads to another. And this was quite a series of one thing leading to another.
Sure it was.
Because they wanted to check my heart, my bladder, my kidneys, and then they finally checked my blood, which of course is supposed to be one of the first things you do.
Yeah. So then, because, you know, now for the audience, I have seen this in Baltimore, and I had seen it prior to in a house concert. And I can't tell you what a good show it is, and it's going to be at Theater J.
In D.C.
In D.C. next June. And when you see that, don't miss it. It's something that every woman and every man should see, and it's wonderful storytelling.
Thank you. And we're finding out even the young men and the young women are enjoying it. So, because it's funny. I mean, a lot of it's funny.
A lot is very funny.
A lot of it is information that people don't know, young people particularly don't know. Mm-hmm. Whoa, they say, I didn't know that was true. Mm-hmm. And then more and more young people are saying, I think I should find out more. I'm glad I saw this because now I know what's going on with my dad.
Exactly. Well, and the night that you told it at Patterson Theater, what is that? That's the Creative Alliance? Or
Creative Alliance at the Patterson.
At the Patterson. Wonderful old movie house. And there were a number of doctors or training doctors, residents and from Hopkins that were there. And there'd been a big newspaper spread on you, so there were a lot of patients, people who'd had problems. That was so moving. How did you feel about that Q&A that you did and the response from the families that were there that had just gone through the same thing?
I felt great about it.
Right.
And so happy that there was also so much laughter.
Yes.
During the piece, because in medical situations, something funny always happens, and it seems to me once I started to think about it, lots of funny things
Exactly.
were happening.
Exactly.
And it helps to smile. And it's easier to smile now since I'm through it and I'm fine.
Yes.
But yes, I loved that audience response. It actually was not quite as intense as some of the house concerts I've done, which were more intimate.
Yes.
And I think you were at this one, but maybe you had to leave. At one discussion, we went on for it was at Gail's house. We went on for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I think.
Yeah, because we were driving. Well, one of the things that I found so interesting in Baltimore was the couple that said that if they had just heard this early on in his course of treatment, how much easier it would have been for him and for her, because nobody told them these things. You know, they were laughing during the thing and all this, but you're providing not only good story and storytelling, but some really important information that people need.
Yeah, one of the exciting things working on it for me internally and sort of for my own process and so forth is that I think I found some ways to give information in a story form, or to make it part of a narration as opposed to a lecture. So I mean, you can come away from this being much less ignorant than I was before I started. Even though I had prostate cancer, I had to look it up, and I didn't really know I wasn't really sure what a prostate was and what it did, and it's pretty vital.
Right. Now, when you talk about because now you've been developing long narratives based on oral history, taking the 9/11 comes to mind, the big thing that you did over at the Pentagon, etc. So did you work the process the same way as you did when you were gathering material from other people, but this time you were gathering from your own inner sources and whatever?
Well, I was gathering from my own and from other people at this. But yes, it's the same way as interviewing a lot of, that was where I was commissioned to interview on the first anniversary of 9/11, interview a lot of first responders and people who were in the Pentagon when the plane hit. But in a way, it's the same process. I mean, you try to take in as much material as you can,
right?
And then you go through some stuff that's, whether it's my own writing or somebody else's story, it's, oh, that's sort of boring and not interesting, but you put that aside, and then sometimes you find out, oh, that's not boring now. Or sometimes you're really excited.
Right.
So, I mean, I work a lot through kind of journal writing, and not, I don't set out, I know how I'm going to write a piece, and it's going to start this way and end that way. I just start working on it. And then it becomes a matter of piecing it together. And all of that comes from, since I've done it a lot now, comes from the faith that, yeah, it will come together.
The cake will rise.
Yes.
It will come. Now,
Right.
the thing that you did, the process you were using, you've talked about before, is that you used a lot of house concerts. Maybe our audience doesn't really understand what that is. How do you describe that process? You had a lot of
Right.
house
That
concerts.
means I went to people, or then people started coming to me because I was sort of advertising it by word of mouth, that I would like to come and do a free reading of this. Because with these long things, I write them down. I do it the impossibly hard way. Write it down and then memorize it, and then try to say it as if it had never been memorized.
Right, right. You do a good job of that, yeah.
But that was exploring the scripts, of reading it to people and then getting feedback from people. So I suppose I did 15 at least of those in D.C. and Baltimore and out in Ijamsville. Is that how you pronounce it?
Iamsville.
Iamsville. The J is silent. Okay.
Yeah,
Iamsville, Maryland. That's one night when you were there. And those have been extremely helpful. And I was also using them in a way to try to get other people who might actually have some money to make, since this is how I make my living,
Right.
Who might actually have some money to come see some of them.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's a long process. So, do you think that all long pieces or pieces experimental, like you're talking about with this or with the 9/11 piece or whatever, that you need to sort of gel them that way by having them heard by different people? How did it affect you getting the different feedback? Going into small groups and then getting feedback like that over time.
Oh, a lot, I think. Yeah. For example, it's in two parts with an intermission in between. So one of the things that I got was for people was that I like both parts, but they don't seem to go together. And I kept hearing that, and I think I found ways that they're now together. It may not be in any logical way, but you feel like they're connected.
Yeah, I felt that they were very connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that was realizing that I had left my family out of a lot of it. And so my wife and daughter are back in it a lot more, and they're sort of a thread, throughout.
Well, that's sort of like the truth in the life for everybody, is that no one has an illness or an accident or anything alone. If you're part of a family, it happens to the entire family, doesn't it?
Right, yeah.
So any injury or anything happens within a family. I noticed that from having heard it earlier and then heard it when you presented it in Baltimore, that there seemed to be more of them.
So there were bigger things like that, and then sometimes specific wording. I mean, people would even have a question as to, I think the very last word of the evening is now based on a suggestion from somebody. They said, what if you change the last word to this instead of that?
What is it? I don't remember.
The last word is home.
Interesting. That
Because that's a scene about, it's remembering a time I was lost in a Florida swamp on,
Well,
on a
okay, I got it.
backpacking trip.
And now
And
you're
I think the way I said it, I was saying it for a long time, was I'd get up in the morning, I was camping out, found a place to camp, and I'll find my way out.
Oh, what a difference that makes, John.
Yeah, right.
Not out, but home.
Yeah. And then finding that led me back more into family and stuff. And that's what put me back into some more about the material from Moby Dick that comes in.
Right. Now, you see, for the audience, many of whom are storytellers, what you've just said is really important to listen to if you yourself are a story maker. You know, that's really important stuff, that how you even examine the words. So do you do that on all your stuff? Do you go back and look at the words, the value of the words, and like out to home changes everything?
Right, right. Oh, and I'm going to tell some little stories from the Lincoln stories later. Just in getting ready for that, I sort of edited them, and I'm doing them in a different way than I would do in a full 45-minute performance. So I had to do some rewriting, and once I'm back into the script, I go, why was I using that word? This word is so much more resonant for...
Right. So now we are shifting to ask you the process in putting together your piece of Lincoln. Tell us in just a couple of sentences, a little setup for that, for the Lincoln piece.
Well, I did a lot of research. So
Right.
you gather a lot of material. It's the same as anything else. I think you gather a lot of material. And I found out that Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian writer, was an absolute Lincoln fanatic. And that once, about 35 years after Lincoln's death, he was invited to Chechnya. That's all in the news right now.
Oh, it sure is.
But he was invited with a group of totally isolated people to tell them stories. When he was at a party, they said, tell us stories about great heroes. And he told them some. They said, no, we want to hear stories about the Lincoln. So word of mouth had traveled to this tiny little settlement. And he wrote about the way he spoke, the way he told them the story. So I started from there. So it's as if Leo Tolstoy is telling this story in 1890 to a group of isolated mountain people.
So there you're letting us in on the fact that this setup is really a product of your imagination, but based on facts of things that happened.
Yes.
He was at a party, he was asked, and then you've taken that nugget and created the story.
Right. I actually use a few of his words in describing them and the stories he took. But yes, it's from that idea.
Yeah. What do you see as I saw you do that piece at Ford's Theater for a group of mixed audience, young people and senior, old people or me, whatever. And we were all loving it at the same level. So what do you think is your target audience for that show?
Everybody over 10 years old.
Well, I
Yeah.
felt at the time it was perfect for every school in the country.
Yes, yes. I do it for schools. I do it for family audiences. I do it for adults only. There's even about Lincoln, you could tell just a few adults only stories,
Yeah.
Which was one of the interesting things I found out. He was rumored to have been a really bawdy storyteller. So I said, oh, well, I'll find some of those. So I found a few. They're not bawdy by today's standards at all. It would be like I saw her twirl around and I could see her petticoats. That was a sort of X-rated story
Right.
in those days.
Now, aren't you really just waiting to hear the story from the Lincoln that Jon Spelman is going to tell in just a second? Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool.
Not cool.
Not in my house, not anywhere. It's not creative, it's offensive to gay people. And you're better than that.
I thought I'd tell you some selections from this collection of stories called Tales of the Lincoln, which I mentioned before is based on an experience Leo Tolstoy had where he went to this this isolated village, and everyone there referred to Abraham Lincoln as the Lincoln. And Tolstoy realized that over 35 years after his death, in a whole other part of the world, Lincoln had become a kind of legendary figure in folklore, as if you were talking about the king, or the prince, or the leader. He was the Lincoln. Now, during Lincoln's lifetime, most good stories were often considered better stories if they were told as if they were by or about Abraham Lincoln. Here's one of those stories. They say that old Abe was riding his horse along a narrow country road when he found his way totally blocked by a huge load of hay which had fallen off the back of a wagon. And the young boy who'd been driving the wagon was jumping up and down, terribly upset and excited. "Oh, Pa's going to kill me for this. He's really going to give it to me." Lincoln got down from his horse. He said, "It's okay, son. I'll help you get that hay up. And look, there's a house. I bet we can find some help over there." And they went over to this farmhouse, and sure enough, this kind-hearted farmer said he'd be glad to help them. But then, seeing the boy's tears, he said, "Well, why don't we sit and eat for a few minutes, have a bite with me and my wife?" So they all sat down. Lincoln was enjoying his food, but the boy was barely touching his food, very agitated and upset. "Oh, Pa's not going to like me being away so long. I just can't be away so long." Lincoln said, "Now, don't worry, son. Don't worry. I'm sure your dad knows an accident can happen to everybody. Let's just eat." And Lincoln helped himself to some more potatoes. "Oh, no," said the boy. "No, no, 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 no. He's going to give it to me really bad." "All right," said Lincoln. "All right, I'll tell you what. I will go with you and explain to your father just what happened, okay? Where is your father?" "That's what I'm saying," said the boy. "That's what I'm telling you. My pa's out there under all that hay." Now, when Lincoln was a boy, he also told stories, loved to tell stories. He would read stories and poems and memorize them and recite them to other kids and any adult who would listen. And he also told his own stories. He told about how one time he'd woken up early in the morning. He had a very sore throat. His voice was barely above a whisper. And his stepmother, Sarah, was outside. He could hear her working in the garden, and he called to her, "Sarah, Sarah." But she couldn't hear him. "So here's what I did," Abe told his friends. He said, I looked around and I found a little piece of broken glass, a looking glass, and I held it up at just the right angle to the window. Sarah was out there, and I whispered her name as loudly as I could into that mirror, and the mirror bounced it out, expanded the sound so that Mama Sarah heard it, and she came back and helped me. And a friend of Lincoln's once told how Lincoln, as a boy, had challenged a grown man from the city to a talking contest. He swore the story was true. He said boy and man talked to each other and at each other for hours and hours and hours, until finally, after 20 hours, everybody who was watching and listening had fallen asleep. And when they started to wake up about 7 hours later, they saw that the man, too, had finally gone to sleep. But Abe was still sitting on the ground right next to him, still talking, still telling stories. When young Abe was only 10 years old, he was almost killed in an accident on his father's farm. He was out working with an old horse one day about 2 miles from the cabin, and he realized that time was running out. Afternoon shadows were growing on, and he wanted to hurry to get back to the house in order to finish the book he'd started the day before while there was still daylight. So he got up on the horse, tried to get it going, but the old horse just wouldn't move fast enough. Abe got down and pulled on the reins, but the horse wouldn't move. Finally, in total impatience, young lad got behind the horse and began to push on him and scream at him, come on, you lazy good-for-nothing." Bam! The horse kicked back, struck Abe right in the middle of his forehead, and knocked him bloody and unconscious to the ground. His father, Thomas, finally found him, took him back to the house, decided he was still alive, put him in bed, and there he lay, unconscious, all through that night and through almost all of the next day. And finally he woke up, but he still couldn't utter a sound, couldn't say a word, until about 4 hours later, he sat up in bed and he said, "As I was saying, get going, you lazy good-for-nothing old bag of bones." Lincoln was a very serious man, but he also loved a good story. And Although he only finished second grade, he was an excellent, outstanding writer and speaker. And he was the most technologically advanced leader of his generation, utilizing new technologies, particularly the telegraph and the photograph, in new and unusual ways. The telegraph, which sent his voice through wires, allowed him during the Civil War to be in close contact with his generals, and he actually became a kind of commander-in-chief on the field. The photograph was also a new technology, and Lincoln used it the way people use publicity now. He saw the value of publicity and celebrity, so he posed for as many pictures as he could. And just before he ran for president the first time, he sat for a photographer, and then he told this story about himself. He said, when I was just about to run for president, some fellow decided that a lot of people might like to know what Abraham Lincoln actually looked like. So I'd recently sat for this photograph, and he went out and he bought the negative. And then from the negative, he made untold copies. And so efficient was their distribution that soon they were for sale all over the United States, including in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois. I heard a boy calling them for sale on the street right in front of my house. Buy your likeness of Abe Lincoln. Buy one now. Better get it now while the price is good. Price only 2 cents. Mr. Lincoln's next picture will cost a good deal more after he gets his hair combed. I was often described, Lincoln once said to a friend, as a huge man with a sallow face and an enormous coconut-shaped head, sitting just under a great thatch of wild black hair, ruffled in the wind like a blackbird's feathers. Lincoln was serious, but he loved funny stories, and he'd put them together sometimes. Once, as president, he went to see some of his soldiers who'd been put in jail for various offenses, and he was talking to one soldier. He said, "Why are you in?" He said, "Well, sir, I was just following orders." "What do you mean?" said Lincoln. "Well, sir, one morning I woke up and I was feeling very sick, so I went to see the doctor in his tent. And I stepped in, and he looked up at me. He was busy writing at a table, and he looked up at me and said, 'My God, you look terrible. You'd better take something.' And I said, well, what should I take? What do you think I should take?" But he had turned back to his writing and appeared not to hear me. So I looked all around for something I could take, but the only thing I could see was the doctor's watch on the table, so I took that. And that's why I'm in jail. And Lincoln laughed, and he said, "That's a good story. But next time, don't steal." He was a brilliant general, a ruthless general who was responsible for the deaths of many, many people. But he was also a man with a generous and kind heart. His very good friend Joshua Speed used to tell this story about him. He said, one time, 6 of us were riding along horseback through the country, 2 by 2 together, and Lincoln and a Mr. Hardin were bringing up the rear. And as they were riding along, Lincoln noticed by the side of the road 2 small birds who seemed to have been blown out of their nest and couldn't fly back. Their mother was hopping around them, wailing piteously like a mother ever does for her babes. Hardin kind of laughed. Lincoln stopped his horse and got down, picked up the 2 birds, and began walking around with them in his hand, looking for their nest to return them to it. The other 4 of us had stopped to water our horses at a stream, and Hardin rode up, and we said, "Where's Lincoln?" And Hardin said, "Oh, well, the last time I saw him, he had 2 little birdies in his hand and was walking around looking for their house to put them in." After about a half hour, Lincoln rode up, and some of us laughed at him. But he looked at us with all seriousness, and he said, "Gentlemen, you may laugh, but I would not have slept well tonight if I had not saved those birds. Their dying cries would have rung in my ears." That's some stories from Tales of the Lincoln.
Bring this one.
Welcome back. Well, John, that was just like listening to Lincoln or really seeing a picture of him as you were telling those stories.
Oh, thanks. That's wonderful to hear, because I think one of the things we work for as storytellers is to give someone a picture. And if it can be a consistent picture
Exactly.
like that, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. When you work with that material, when you're trying to get his voice and take his voice like that, did it change your feeling for him as a man?
Yes, because I think you wrote this once, I think, that that Lincoln studied in school as if he is kind of the Lincoln,
Yeah.
as if he's a legend and a saint, and to find out more that he's really more of a man.
Yeah.
And what I don't get into so much for kids, but it was fascinating. I mean, you talk about he was not a very good husband a lot of times, but a very, very devoted father. You know, like anybody else, he had.
Right. And that's what's always been written about him. You know, about his love of his son.
Right.
You know, but Mary Lincoln was getting kind of a hard go there. She had a hard time.
She was a hard woman, and he was not an easy man. I mean, imagine any man trying to deal with the Civil War on his back.
Right. But that's a beautiful picture that you chose to tell that piece about the birds, that he would have grieved so, felt so guilty if he'd hurt them.
And that was, although I said, I think the way I phrased it this time, he's actually directly responsible for the deaths of thousands of people in that war by saying,
Exactly.
attack now, attack.
Okay.
But he grieved enormously over that. Yeah.
So I can just see this picture, this whole opportunity to show Lincoln as a man so real in schools, particularly older children, older students, I think, would pick up on that.
And we're so used to seeing his face that people are first shocked to find out that in his time, people thought Lincoln was really an ugly man, and he was actually pretty viciously attacked in newspapers for being ugly.
Well, all they had to go by was the cartoonist or the caricaturist, actually, the sketch.
Right, and then when the photographs started to come out, they would sort of, the cartoons had already started that. So,
Yes.
I mean, if you stop and look at Lincoln, he's not like anybody you've ever seen before, I don't think. I mean, and he was huge for his time. He was about my size, but that means he was really almost a giant.
You're a giant of a man, Jon Spelman.
No, but Ulysses Grant was
Right.
like 5'7" or 5'8".
Exactly.
Right? And then Lincoln you see those pictures, Lincoln would go see him with a top hat on top of that.
Yeah.
So his top hat was at 7 feet 4 inches or something.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing
Thank
Abraham
you.
Lincoln with you. And now watch for the Prostate Dialogues here in Washington at Theater J. And you can find out more about Jon Spelman at www.jonspelman.com.
Correct.
Correct. So, and please come back. We'll have another guest next time.